Hello, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Hart HP HL01B 20 volt hand light. So let's get started. Okay, starting off at the bottom of the tool, we have the 20 volt battery slot, which will accept any of Hart's 20 volt batteries. Overall, this slot is a perfectly fine design. When you take the battery out or put the battery back in, the action is nice and smooth and it doesn't get caught up on anything. So I think this is a good thing. Now, if you take the battery out when the light is turned on and then reinsert the battery, the light will come back on because I think it's a fairly simple circuitry design on the inside without any sort of protection. So that's just something else to be aware of. So, moving on. And moving upward, we have a void. Now, overall, this void isn't filled up with invisible gases as well as fine particulate matter flying through those invisible gases. Now, overall, this void is a reflection of the void in many people's lives and will definitely leave you with a sense of sadness and longing and just an overall depression. I'm just kidding. This is actually the 2x4 clamping area that if you're working with 2x4s, you can push the light onto the 2x4 and it should stay in place. Now, I actually have had some situations where it won't stay in place because it's an older 2x4 and it's thicker, and I've had some situations where it's a newer 2x4 and the light will fall off because it's not thick enough. So overall, as long as your 2x4 is of the proper dimensions, it will work, and it actually works fairly well when you combine it with the rotating light. So overall, this is a useful feature and it is a good design. It's just not going to be 100% useful 100% of the time. So that's just something to be aware of. If you are trying to leave the light, say, on a thinner shelf where the handle's on top of the shelf and the battery's underneath the shelf, that probably won't stay simply because of the way that it's weighted, and the battery will cause it to fall off the shelf. So that's just something else to be aware of. So overall, it's a useful design, but like I said, I don't think the average homeowner is going to be using this all the time, unless you live in an unfinished attic or you just don't believe in drywall. Everybody has their own preferences. And moving upward, we have the grip. Now overall, the grip on this particular light has a nice rubberized texture, which has several ridges and valleys, as well as a brick design to the rubberized texture, which will definitely help in wet situations. So overall, I think the rubberized coating is definitely good on this particular light. I will say that the overall length of the handle is a little short. I really would have preferred probably about another inch and a half to the overall length of the handle, simply because as it stands right now, it feels like it's a little bit short and maybe feels a little bit more like it was made for a kid's hands rather than an adult's hands. So overall, the handle is good, it just feels too short. And at the back of the handle, we have another void. This void is also going to leave you with a sense of emptiness, and I'm just kidding. This is actually a fairly useful point for if you want to hang the light on a hook or something, or if you want to attach a carabiner or strap. So overall, I really do like the fact that it has this additional little strapping point or hanging point on the back of the handle. So overall, I really do think that that's a useful feature again. And they actually made it big enough that you could get a small carabiner through if you so choose to. So I think this is a good design. And moving to the front of the light, we have the rotating head. Now the rotating head has a single bead LED inside of a silver dish which pushes the light out, and it's a fairly simple design. Now the rotating head is definitely an interesting feature, and I'm not sure how overall effective it actually is. I think if you're in the right situation, it can be effective, but I think a lot of the time it's just not going to give you the exact angle that you need, and you're just going to have to figure out another way of lighting whatever project you're working on. So overall, the design is interesting. I just don't think it's exactly the best that they could have went with. I really think more of a traditional up and down adjustable light would have been a little bit more, well, preferable to what we actually got here. But then again, it's not as bad as it could be, because they could have went with a static design which you couldn't adjust at all. So overall, it's a mixed bag, and it's really going to be up to you on what you personally decide on this light. I don't know. I still have mixed feelings about it. And moving to the top of the LED light, we have the on-off button. The on-off button is as simple as it comes. You push it once to turn the light on, you push it once to turn the light off. There is no medium, there is no low, it's just the high. But I guess that can be a mixed blessing of sorts, because you don't get the strobe function, which is completely useless and annoying, and I really personally hate with a passion. It's not useful 99.9% of the time, and I really personally would like to hit whoever puts that function on a lot of these flashlights in the head with a rubber mallet. So overall, I am glad that it doesn't have a strobe function, but I do miss the medium and low settings. So overall, it's not as bad as it could be, but it could be a lot better. Okay, let's talk about the light output. Now overall, the light output coming out of this flashlight is fairly decent. It's rated at 200 lumens, and I'd say that's probably fairly accurate, although I don't have a way of actually testing it. Now the center of the beam is very bright and the edges are much darker, meaning that this is a searchlight or spotlight style flashlight. So it'll definitely be good in outdoor situations, but if you're working in tight spaces where you need to have an area light, this is not going to be your number one choice when it comes to that. Now overall, the brightness is decent, But at the same time, when you're working with a 20-volt battery, you kind of expect a little bit more. So I don't know, it's a mixed bag. Not having it be super bright will definitely give you that increased runtime, but then again, if they'd opted to give you a high, medium, low, you could have decided that for yourself rather than be forced with the one constant level of lighting. So that's another little bit of the downside to having a simple light like this. Now the center of the beam is obviously very bright and will do a good job of illuminating whatever you're working on. And then the middle ring is a little bit of a, well, it has a little bit of a yellow tint to it and is definitely dimmer. And then the outer ring, which takes up the majority of the lighting area of this particular light when you're working underneath 6 feet, is of a cool color, which is much dimmer. So overall, it will work in a pinch if you're working in a tight environment, but this is definitely not going to be your go-to for working underneath a car or underneath a cabinet. So that's just something else to be aware of. Without a battery, the flashlight weighs 192 grams. And with a 4 amp hour battery, the flashlight weighs 821 grams or 1.8 pounds. Okay, let's talk about the pros and cons real quick. And the first pro is rubberized grip. Now overall, the rubberized grip is a nice feature and it will definitely help when you're working in a wet situation or a damp environment. So definitely a pro. 2x4 clamp. The 2x4 clamping feature is nice if you're working in, say, an attic or an unfinished basement. It will come in handy and will definitely be a useful feature to have, and I'm glad that they incorporated it. Decent brightness. This isn't going to be the brightest power tool hand light that you can find on the market, but it does provide a fairly decent amount of light, and it'll definitely be useful if you have a small yard or if you're just looking around your house at night. Rotating lens. Yeah, it's not a tilting lens, but at least it still has something that you can adjust, so it does make it onto the pro list. Size. Overall, it is fairly compact and it's easy to throw inside of a work bag or inside of a backpack or into a drawer, so overall the size is a pro. And the first con would be the price, coming in at a very odd $21.51, tool only. This is definitely on the expensive side considering the amount of light and output of this particular light and how limited your features are. Overall, I definitely wouldn't pay $21.51 for it, but if you can find it on discount at your local Walmart or somewhere else, it is a decent light to have around just so that you can make use of those power tool batteries in an emergency situation. Limited angles. Overall, because of the rotating lens design, you really are limited on what kind of angles you can actually get with this particular flashlight, and it really is not the best design. So overall, I would definitely consider that would be a con. One mode. Overall, I really am disappointed that this only has one mode. I really think that you should have gotten at least 3 modes, but I can understand how some people would prefer one mode, and at least it doesn't have that annoying, super useless, nobody ever used function called strobe, or SOS for that matter. And the last con would be the short grip. Overall, I really think the grip should have been at least an inch longer, and that definitely would have made this a lot more comfortable to carry around. But overall, it's not really that big of a con, but it still is a little bit of one, so that's why it's on the list. And that is it for the pros and cons. Final thoughts on this light. Overall, this light does its job, and it does its job just fine. I really think this light is more suited for outdoor environments rather than indoor environments, but it will still be useful indoors as well. My biggest concern with this light would probably be the price. At $21, this just isn't that great of a bargain, and quite frankly, I think you'd be better off finding a cheaper flashlight on Amazon or some other website that is rechargeable. But everybody has different preferences, and everybody has different needs, so I can see this being very appealing to certain people. But for me personally, I'm going to stick with my handheld flashlight that I can fit in my pocket. And that is it for this video. If you liked it, please like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time. God bless.